Due to the nature of these stories, I don't really want to give out my actual name. As you can guess, I've already had more than a few run-ins with official sources, authorities, and a few that I can only imagine were on the borderline paranormal themselves. So, for now, just call me Detective. No, I'm not a real detective, nor have I ever worked in a criminal investigation field, but this is the internet, and if people can call themselves rainbow zebras and make friends online, then I can call myself a detective, damn it. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, I collect different weird stories from police, EMTs, soldiers, and the like. I call them my case files. Most of them remain unsolved, but I'm not looking for any answers here. I just feel like these cases need to be shared. Something to remind us all that the truth is, stranger than fiction sometimes. Some names and dates are changed to protect those involved, obviously. Case number 18. Eddie. Shadow People. Now this one comes in from an old war vet I met with after looking for another similar string of shadow people sightings. Ed was wrinkled, sun-dried, with a shaggy head of white hair and a very kind of vulgar sense of humor. For my first phone call to set up a meeting with him, I had never thought it possible to hear the word fuck so many times in under 60 seconds. His last words to me before I hung up were, "Fuck yeah, I'll tell you my fucking weird fucking story. Fucking nice." A real expanded vocabulary, that one. What follows is my transcription of Eddie's story, with as few F-bombs as I could get away with removing. Yeah, so it was probably like 0300 and we had just been run ragged and them fucking bugs were eating us alive, boys. Let me tell you. We were tired, sick of being in the jungle, and ready to get our soaking wet socks off. I was near the front of the patrol and I know I was supposed to be looking around and watching my ass, but it's late and the full moon was shining through, so I thought I could just watch my feet shuffle along and zone out until we got back. But that's when the guy in front of me, Corporal, gasped. But it was too late. Poor guy took a spike board right to the gut and chest, and as soon as it was sprung, we were in an ambush. So we hit the dirt, firing back at the muzzle flashes pointing at us from the jungle darkness ahead. They were probably less than a few hundred meters away. We were in a bad spot, for sure. But then we started to notice something. The gunfire hadn't stopped, but the sounds of rounds flying over and hitting the trees around us did. See, they weren't firing at us anymore. They were fighting with something else. So we stopped shooting and just watched the flashes from the bushes where we was in. Then that is when we heard the screaming. Not like orders being shouted or taunts or, the general panic, but blood-chilling screams. And I mean, it's just as fast as that shit started, it was over. No more rounds being fired, no more screams, just the night jungle air around us with a few rays of moonlight hitting in certain areas. So we sat there, all barrels pointed towards the spot where we were sure they were at, and we waited for what felt like forever. But nothing. Well, nothing until it sounded like movement. The rustling leaves coming right for us. Anyway, that's when we fired off a flare overhead. Yeah, it'd make us stand out, but we had to see them too. You have to remember, we were just a bunch of scared and tired kids back then. Anyway, when the flare went up, we saw people, but they weren't the ones we were expecting. They were these skinny figures just standing in the jungle, and even with the flare's light shining on them, it gave us a good look at them, but they remained these solid black shapes. They didn't like that bright light too much though, so when it went up, they all scattered back into the dark. And I don't mean like they just sprinted, they leaped and crawled all around the foliage until they were just gone. But even without them in sight, I could feel like they were still watching. So we broke off after that, hightailed it away. They sent us back the morning after looking for a body count, but, well, they got one. Because we found 14 dead enemies in that spot where we had engaged them. Only thing is, we didn't hit a single fucking thing. Not one of those bastards had a single gunshot wound. No, whatever got to them had clawed them real good. Hell, it tore them sons of bitches apart. We hauled the chunks of meat and limbs back out of there, and I heard some high ranks came down to collect them personally. Well, anyway, we got told that it was just some combat fatigue, and we were successful in defeating an enemy ambush. But if you saw those... Look, all I'm gonna say is that a rifle don't leave claw marks, and it sure as hell don't gouge out eyes. Ed took a moment to recompose himself and was back to making jokes soon after. He offered me a cigarette, which I declined, and he offered me a few more stories about his time in. None of them were of any interest to my collection, however. I think it did the old guy some good to remember and tell his stories. I think in a weird way, he just wanted to tell someone who would listen for once. And in some weird way, I believe him. Case number 4. Jane Doe. Fallen Angel. In the early evening hours of a peaceful Saturday, an object fell from the sky and landed in a field behind Robbie Decker's home. Robbie and his wife Maria were sitting on their rocking chairs and conversing when they saw something fall right out of the sunset-painted clouds and land hard with an impact that kicked up dirt high into the air. Robbie called authorities and had sheriff deputies come out and take a look. Once on the scene, they all made their way to the field with searchlights in tow and inspected the scene to find a mangled corpse of a woman. The impact had essentially turned the poor girl into a barely recognizable form. Her bones beyond repair, her blood pooled into the dirt, making a stained, muddy, dark residue. And her long black hair was matted, tangled in a mess that clung to the fragments of what used to be her head. Upon viewing the sight, the three men all began to weep and sob uncontrollably. They all reported feeling a great loss of hope and dread, as if they were just told the most important person in their lives were just killed. This feeling afflicted anyone who came to view the corpse, making the removal process a very difficult task. Well, even more difficult than scraping a crumbled person out of a crater is. I got around to asking a few of the hands that helped move that one and found out a few more weird things had happened afterwards. For one, she had no clothing whatsoever. Also, there were no flights to be recorded traveling over that area at that time, nor did the couple see anything beyond a falling figure. So this naked woman just seemed to fall right out of the sky. Bare skin and subjected to the cold, slicing winds before hitting the ground harder than what should have been possible. Next is that her body began to decay fast. Even once they had her in the morgue, she was showing signs of decay equal to a body left out in the sun for weeks. By this point, the sorrow people felt for her had no effect upon viewing the body. Within 48 hours, there was little more than a heap of broken bones. Any attempt at getting samples for testing also failed, as none of them were viable for use once separated from the girl. Eventually, they had to seal up her brittle, cracking bones in a container, and before the month was done, barely anything but a small dust pile remained in their place. Now that's it. I'll post some more once I go through some of the first cases I collected. I'm moving soon, so this gives me a chance to reorganize my folders and relive some of the strange things I first found out about. Anyway, thanks for listening.